Okay.
Hey, thanks, Colton. Okay, good morning. Thanks for joining, everyone. I have a brief script that I need to read to open the meeting with, so if you'll bear with me. Good morning. I'm Juliana Reshik, and I serve as the president of the Kansas State Board of Nursing. I ask the members of the board to respond to a roll call to signify their presence at this open meeting that is being conducted remotely. Rebecca Sonder. Becky, I can see you're on. Can you hear us okay? Carol, can I just do a sound check? Can you hear me okay?
I can hear you fine. Yeah.
Okay. I wonder if Becky's having trouble hearing. Oh, there. It says she's connecting to audio now. Becky, can you hear us okay? Okay. And can you just signify your presence for the recording?
Oh, Rebecca Sander, board member.
Thank you. Andrea Watson. I don't see Andrea on my screen.
I believe she's reconnecting.
Okay.
Yes, she said she's having some issues with her audio and it's reconnecting.
Okay. Maybe we're out of practice with our virtual meetings. Okay, Andrea, were you able to reconnect? Give Andrea just a minute. Oh, there she is. Andrea, can you hear us okay? Okay, we'll give Andrea just a minute we'll come back to her. Melissa Orpeza.
Here, Melissa Orpeza, board member.
How about Lori Owen?
I'm here, Lori Owen, board member.
And Giovanni Gone? I didn't see Giovanni in my screen either, so she may be trying to connect. Andrea Watson, were you able to connect? You may be still working on it. I ask that the following staff members who are also present to respond. Carol Moreland, Executive Administrator.
Present.
Janelle Martin, Nursing Education Compliance Officer.
Present.
And Jill Simmons, Executive Assistant.
Present.
Before we begin the meeting, I want to make the following statements regarding this meeting that is being conducted remotely. Public comment allows individuals to address the board about their concerns, but the Kansas Open Meetings Act, which is known as KOMA, does not require the board to provide public comment or answer questions from individuals. Today, we will not have public comment due to the length of the meeting and the possibility that the connection for the remote meeting may be lost. Because we are conducting this public meeting by Zoom and YouTube, I state for the record the following information. On December 16th, 2022, the board sent notice of the meeting for all the board to all individuals who have requested notice of the board's meetings. Additionally, the notice and agenda were posted on the board's website, ksbn.kansas.gov. The notice contains the internet links to attend the meeting by Zoom and YouTube. The notice also contains the Zoom telephone number to attend the meeting. These electronic mediums allow the public to attend this meeting free of charge by either video conference or telephone. The notice also advises individuals to contact the board's office at 785-296-2967 if they experience a technical difficulty during the meeting. You may obtain a copy of the notice and agenda at the website or by sending an email to carol.moreland@ks.gov with the subject line, request for the agenda, and the board staff will send it to you. The only mediums for interactive communication offered for this meeting are the connections by Zoom and YouTube as previously stated. Each member of the board, board staff, or presenter shall state the person's name and title each time the person speaks or votes, as the case may be. Each participant to this meeting shall ensure microphones, phones, or other electronic devices are on mute when the participant is not speaking. Each motion will be clearly stated before the board votes, and the president will announce the result of the final vote. A statement or motion will clearly identify and authorize by delegation each member of the board or staff who will be permitted to sign any document on behalf of the board. The meeting is being recorded and the recording will be posted on the board's website. The board has the following items listed on the agenda: call to order, discuss possible changes to licensure requirements, and adjournment. As noted above, the board may take an executive session. If the board elects to exercise that option to go into executive session, the board will follow this process. First, the board must be in open session before going into an executive session. Then a motion will be made and seconded pursuant to KSA 75-4319B, and the motion must contain the statement of justification for closure, the subjects to be discussed, and the time and place that the open meeting will resume. If a motion for executive session passes, the public will be excluded from this portion of the meeting, as the executive session will be conducted by electronic means that will not be made available to the public. The board members will return to the open meeting after the executive session. The open meeting will resume when the board members return to the Zoom and YouTube meeting after the executive session. The complete motion for an executive session will be recorded in the minutes. The meeting is now called to order, and the board will begin the meeting with the next item on the agenda. So, Andrea Watson, were you able to get connected? Oh, I see Andrea now.
There we go. Yeah, sorry. I dialed into my phone. I don't know what's up with my laptop, but I'm on.
Okay, sounds great. Thanks for being here, Andrea.
Yeah, thank you.
And then Giovanni Gonne, were you able to join? I still don't see her. So, okay. So just a reminder, this is a task force that we have put together as we discussed at our board meeting last week. There was an article written and some discussions that Carol had across the street with the legislature requesting that we make some recommendations and changes to licensure and the processes to get licensure. So we created this task force and asked for some folks to come together so we could start doing some brainstorming. This is not a venue where we will be making final recommendations or final changes. We're really just here today to do some brainstorming and hear from a few key individuals that we've asked to join us, who are experts with respect to the education of new nurses. I know at the meeting we asked for some representatives from BSN, ADN, and LPN programs to be made available to join the board today to aid in this discussion. So I might just pause there. Janelle, I know that we asked you to identify some key individuals that would help us, and we didn't give you specific names. So would you help me introducing those that you've invited to our task force today?
Absolutely. This is Janelle Martin, Nursing Education Compliance Officer of the board. We did contacted the organizations that work with that are the program directors for all of the different groups. And we have with us today, and I don't know if you would like them to introduce themselves, but I can tell you who we have. Janine Houchin is here representing BSN, as is Dr. Sally Molesky. from KU, I'm sorry, Janine, as Kate at Kansas Wesleyan University. So we have both private and public institutions represented there. And then from our ADN group, we have Dee Bonenblust, who's also on our education committee, as well as Patsy Zeller, who are representing the ADN groups. And then we have Christina Rudisell and Susan Anderson representing our PN group today. So thank you all for answering the call, so to speak, and letting us know that you could be present today. We appreciate it.
Okay, thank you very much, Janelle. So I'm really going to just, I don't know if everybody has seen the article that was written in the CJ Online. It was shared at the board meeting. I see Janine is shaking her head, so thank you very much. I hope everybody's had an opportunity to read that and understand what our call has been. And if there's questions, I'm happy to answer those. Or Carol, I don't know if you want to make a few comments about your experience across the street and the things that you shared kind of at the board meeting, but then I will just open it up for some free discussion and maybe some brainstorming ideas if there are any.
Sure, this is Carol Moreland, Executive Administrator, and I was actually invited to go over to the Special Committee on Mental Health Beds to talk about the different levels of nursing in the state of Kansas and the education and training requirements for each level. The prior meeting, I was not there, I was listening, but there was a lot of confusion about what LMHTs were, what their scope of practice was, what kind of training they had to have, all of that. They didn't even know who regulated LMHTs. So I did follow up from that meeting with an email to the chair just to explain and to clarify some about LMHT. And just basically that I would be happy to provide any further information they needed. I think that led to me being requested to come and present. And I did present. The timing, I was kind of left at the end of the agenda. And as we all know, things overlap. So I did not have as much time as I was told that I would have. So I was kind of cut off before I was done. But then there was a very, very strong message delivered to me by one of the representatives that this is basically how it was stated to me. In 2019, you brought a bill for the APRNs that had 4,000 hours in it. We passed a bill this year that had 0 hours. So if you can take that many hours out of APRNs, surely you can take hours out of other education. Okay, well, number one, that was transition to practice hours. That was not hours in their educational program. But anyway, the message was given to me very strongly that if the Board of Nursing doesn't make some changes, the legislature will. And so I told them that I would bring that message back to the board, which I did last week. And that kind of led to this because we felt very strongly that the program administrators are the experts on education, nursing education in the state of Kansas, and I'm sure would have a lot of very helpful information. So that kind of sums that up. Is that okay, Juliana?
Yes, that's helpful. Thank you, Carol. So I might, maybe we kind of take this piece by piece. Let's start with our representatives from the BSN programs. And we'll be open to hear any comments or suggestions that you all might have, ideas of actions that we might take.
Sure, I'll start. I'm Janine Houchin from Kansas Wesleyan University. And Sally Maliski is with us from KU. Kind of interesting the timing. We had a meeting in November in which Sally expressed a desire to hear from our membership ideas to help with the workforce shortage, because she serves on a special committee through KBOR that is addressing this issue. So we loaded her down with ideas. We're nothing short of ideas in our council, the Kansas Association of College of Nurses. So I'm going to let Sally speak to that, but I wanted to just address a few more ideas and concerns that have been sent to me by our membership. I sent an email out and just said, whatever it is you want me to say, I will make sure it gets included. I heard from some state program directors and the state college program directors that, their credit hours are set by KBOR for their degree. So this issue is bigger than us in terms of that information, that programs have worked very, very hard at our level to stay at 120 credit hours or not go very far above that. But we are finding that challenging in providing the content our students need, especially in light of the new NCLEX that is rolling out. Many programs are looking at adding anything that can help our students with that clinical judgment. I noticed that the last meeting, their programs are making curriculum changes, and many of them are going above 120 to address that issue in itself. We've added an elective course just to address it. So that was an issue that was raised. I think too, another issue that came up in just a concern is, we answer to our regulatory bodies, but we answer to our national programmatic accreditors. Ours is CCNE. The new BSN Essentials are rolling out and are quite inclusive of content that we currently cover and more. I think it would be a huge challenge for us to reduce any of that to meet their requirements. And of course, their oversight is the Department of Education. So it's a snowball effect we're looking at. Another director reached out and said, let's address wages with nurses. Let's look at that. What can our state legislator, what can they do to help us address that issue? A huge number of graduates are choosing to travel and work as travel nurses. They can make a lot of money. A huge number are going on to graduate school, becoming, graduate level nurses, nurse practitioners, but leaving bedside care. So there's an issue with retaining them at the bedside. And so what can we do to incentivize that? What can we do to make that more appealing? It takes a level of dedication, and obviously wage is not all of it, but it certainly helps. So that was another idea expressed. And I think just those all encompassing would be the feeling from our group. And I'm going to let Sally address the ideas that we had about addressing the workforce shortage.
Thank you, Janine. And I completely agree with what Janine has said. We certainly are bound by our accrediting bodies, our national accrediting bodies, and cannot unilaterally dictate number of hours, both in terms of didactic and clinical. And we also know, we have multiple studies out now that link patient safety to educational preparation. So again, and I guess the other thing I would like to put out before I get into what we talked about, and the group was great at Kaken, is that there's no proof or no evidence that decreasing clinical hours, educational hours will increase the number of nurses coming out. So, I don't see any strong rationale for that. But some of the things that we talked about in the last meeting with Janine and the Kansas Association of Colleges of Nursing, a number of things. Looking at ways that we can support students in need who otherwise might not be able to afford nursing. in order to fill open spots in different programs. And right now, we do have open slots in existing established programs in the state. So facilitating filling those will help increase our workforce and providing incentives, financial incentives to students from underserved areas, high schools, working with community colleges, et cetera. There was a suggestion that the current $1,000 scholarship per student going to community colleges should also, there should also be a similar scholarship for those going to four-year institutions. The $4,500, and this was specific to KBOR scholarship, has not changed in years. And value needs to be added. That needs to be increased to again incentivize students and to increase the affordability of nursing education. Another factor, and I think this is something that Janine also said, students are not always choosing to commit to an institution based on a sign-on bonus or loan repayment or scholarship. And some of that has to do with if a student is in an institution where they do not feel welcomed, where they observe a culture that is not conducive to going to or staying in that institution, chances are they're not going to. And even if they accept that incentive, they leave as soon as that obligation is fulfilled. Let's see. So if utilized, the funding we've discussed are helping to fill students who might not otherwise be able. This is a benefit of expanding some of this supporting and incentives for students. We're going to increase our diversity in the nursing workforce, which is something that we critically need to do, not only expand, but increase that diversity, which will help with the expansion and so forth. Another thought was that that consideration be given to forgiving undergraduate repayment for those students going on to complete a graduate degree. We know that another critical component of the nursing shortage is the nursing educators shortage. And Janine spoke to the salary, but also to helping incentivize some students to go on for graduate degrees to become qualified to be faculty. And additionally, to incentivize teaching in areas where there are greater shortages of nursing faculty. Some states do that by tax incentives. Other states do that by financial incentives, but there are a variety of ways to do that. If we don't have the faculty to educate students, we can't increase the capacity to educate students. So we get into that vicious cycle. Clinical site capacity remains an issue. And kind of as mentioned before, having current staff needing to make students feel welcome and administrators creating that culture that will attract and retain nurses. Another thought was that we need to increase dollars available for the Kansas Nursing Initiative Grant. The amount available has not changed in many years. Many programs were not fully funded this past year. As there's been an increase in programs, while the funds have not increased, the amounts that schools are able to get has decreased. And I think many of us have felt that. The image of nursing that's out there. While the pandemic shone a spotlight on nursing, a lot of what people have seen and what we would hope to be prospective future nurses is the exhausted nurse crumpled up on the floor with his or her head and hands. And that can make people question whether they want to go into the profession. So another thought was, well, can we do a media blitz that that really focuses on the benefits and the multiple roles and the multiple ways of entering nursing and then entering different career paths might help with this. And if some of you may have seen, Johnson & Johnson has a new advertisements out that are really very good. And I learned recently that they have helped some states too with some of that media production and really making it attractive to come into nursing. And then if we can incentivize it, we might have some success. And then finally, reaching out. College is too late. We need to reach out, yes, in the first couple of years of college, students entering college at our different institutions, but high school students and earlier. High school students really don't realize what could be available to them in terms of a nursing career. And when we talk about reaching out to under-resourced high schools, be it in urban areas or rural areas, providing programs that allow them to be successful in coming into nursing and progressing if they so choose. So things like funding mentorship, tutoring, staff support, NCLEX review support, NCLEX preparation support are all things that can help students be successful and feel comfortable coming into the field at different levels. And then another thought was scholarshiping at a higher level those who are willing to work in rural areas. So Janine, that's kind of, did I miss anything?
I think you hit all of it.
Okay, thank you.
You took great notes.
Thank you. Yeah, no, it was. People have really outstanding ideas and innovative ideas in looking at how we address nursing, the nursing shortage, but yet we want to maintain the quality of nursing. I don't think any of us want nurses who are not well educated, well qualified to care for us or any of our loved ones. And it's certainly, we need to maintain the quality of health and health care in the state. So I think that's our soapbox.
Sally, I think that was really well said. And I appreciate your final comments there. I think you've articulated the feelings of a very large group of nurses and the idea that we don't want to see our profession deteriorate by lowering or minimizing the education expectations. So I appreciate what you said. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Janine, Sally, you both had great ideas. I took feverish notes and I know several people are, so we'll be combining those with others. But Okay, let's hear from maybe some of our ADN colleagues.
Okay, hi, Juliana. This is Dee, and I'll
Hi,
start. Patsy will
Patsy's
actually
on
add to this as well. We too, first of all, I want to mimic what Dr. Janine and Dr. Sally just said. That's exactly, we met as a group, and here again, a lot of ideas came forward. But I will reiterate our main focus is on patient safety, especially now in the light of the new next generation NCLEX with the clinical judgment model. So we too would be really concerned, I think everyone, with decreasing anything to do with the curriculum and or especially clinical because of increase in the clinical judgment. So that was probably our very first most concern as to if there would be some sort of recommendation to do that. We too are regulated by our accrediting body, ACEN, which as well is they're responsible for the Department of Education as well. We had several ideas that came forth. Basically, a lot of things are going to be repeat here, but it was creating that positive image for our pre-nursing and our nursing, and then certainly our post. The wages came up for our graduates, that there are such a variety of wages right now, everything from rural hospitals to traveling nurses. And so they're all over the place. And so we felt like that was a concern for retention and maybe even recruitment. So, I'm not sure that that's something that the Board of Nursing certainly regulates, but we're throwing out ideas of what we believe perhaps could be barriers to what, is bringing our students forward and helping that workforce go. The other thing, we would absolutely not promote any decreasing of clinical hours. In fact, with our pass rates wanting to maintain, we're going to be promoting maybe an increase of that, maybe perhaps increasing an increase with preceptors side by side. What we've discovered, one of the things we talked about is that because of the workforce that is not out there, that we may have fewer individuals who are willing to precept for that. And the other thing we've noticed is that our preceptors may not have the years of experience that we have been able to have in the past. So because a lot of our experienced nurses have left the bedside, and so we have our individuals that maybe have 1 year of experience, and so we worry about the quality of that whenever we're sending our students out there. So the other suggestions that the group brought forward were things like helping to remediate. And that was a direct result of, and I think it was Dr. Sally who said that most programs in the state have open positions right now. So if we could fill those positions, we would have a better chance of graduating more students as we move forward, right? And so we feel like that's a barrier to the workforce. So it's kind of like, I'm a real fan of making informed decisions and trying to prevent and move things forward in that direction. So I always try to look at, okay, here's the outcome we're trying to go to, but we oftentimes have to back up, a year or two. And I think in our case at a community college, we're backing up maybe even to junior high, but for sure high school, in that we've got to create a different image for our nurses wanting people to come in. This will date me, but years ago, we went to the second grade and promoted nursing to second graders. And but here again, it's like, wow, was that really effective? But however, I think there was, a study or something at that time that, people start thinking about this, and as they move forward, then they can kind of go through that pathway. So anyway, that was something that was talked about, is what can we do to help our students be better prepared? Because sometimes students don't always make the cut in order to get into the programs. Our programs are very competitive to get into, and you want that. Here again, I'm going to circle back to patient safety in the very end of the outcome there. So those were some suggestions on how can we help applicants, number one, be more qualified, help applicants get through that process. So then we reflected then back to the high school requirements and maybe better partnerships, promotion between those two. The other thing that we identified at the community college level is that because of our client load, I mean, because of our communities, most of our students have families. So therefore they have to work. And so the other thing, a clinical requirement is that they must hold health insurance in order to go to clinical. So it's like a double-edged sword. They have to work full-time in order to get that health insurance, but we have to have the health insurance in order for them to go to clinical and meet that requirement. So do you see how, that is sort of a round, one feeds into the other in that direction. So we didn't know if maybe there's an opportunity with funding out there to help students not have to carry that high of a workload. And so that may or may not be something that happens at other levels of nursing, but it certainly happens at our community college level. The other thing that was brought up is that, at least with ACEN, they have now opened up, I will say, not decreased any of the pass rate requirements, but they have opened up opportunities. For example, if a program is 80%, and honestly, I will let Susan speak to this. She has become kind of our expert in that. She can quote it verbatim. I will just mention it, is that they give us options that if you get 80% the first time, that's great. If not, they can combine it. And Susan, I will refer that to you later on, okay? And so we might consider looking at that, basically pass rate requirements, expanding that requirement a bit. The other things that was brought up by the group is that the barriers, and I believe it was either Janine or Sally also brought this up, was the faculty. So because some areas are very lacking in the qualified faculty in order to teach the classes, they may or may not be able to have as many students. So looking at, and particularly at a community college level, there are fewer programs now that are just for nursing education. A lot of them are, promoted into the nurse practice area as well, as, So we really want to, I'm very happy when we can maintain the graduate work in nursing education because that helps our recruitment and it really primarily helps our retention for the individual faculty who actually want to teach in a nursing program. The other thing that was brought up as a barrier are the clinical sites. So how we, because we're all sharing clinical sites, and as we bring in more programs across the state, and then of course we're a bordering, we're on a border. So then of course we're looking for clinical sites in those outside areas as well. I've already mentioned the preceptor. Clinical instructor was another question. So for example, you can have a full-time instructor, but then because of our regulations, the 1 to 10, and in fact, most hospitals won't let us take the 1 to 10, particularly specialties like OB, pediatrics, psychiatric, things like that. It might be clear down to 1 to 4. So therefore, we need extra and more qualified clinical instructors. Because of that, we don't have the experience out in the clinical area. We might be limited by the number of students so that we can maintain the qualified clinical sites and the qualified clinical instructors. And the poor image was also already brought up, but that we had quite a discussion about that. We all know that the shortage of nursing was way before the pandemic. Everyone on this call knows that. We know it was there. It's just that now the pandemic has really, because it has, crippled the system for a while. And I'm still saying a while. I do still have this great hope that we are going to get there and get past this. But I really do believe, and I think it was Dr. Sally who said, the image right now is maybe not as positive. I've said, nurses, we were the healthcare hero, but the images that it portrayed may not have promoted that our junior high school students say, hey, that's what I want to do someday. And I'm thrilled that Johnson & Johnson, and I've got the one of their things that they put in the newspaper on my door, actually right now promoting that nursing is so much more, and how do we get that message out to, so not necessarily our students that are in the programs now, but to our pre-students. So that's what I will say. And then I will pass this over to Patsy, who will have another group of ideas and suggestions. So thank you.
Thank you, Dee. We appreciate those. Patsy?
Yes, thanks for the opportunity to share some thoughts. I will again, too, reiterate several ideas that have already been spoken to, but just with a little different flavor. It's odd how we all make a list of things and we put it on our paper. I have 3 renditions of what I made as to what I wanted to say first. And it's odd for me, but the thing that floats to the top for me is the image of nursing. I realize we have an immediate need right here, but if I personally feel that if we take care of the immediate need, that's great, and we need to, but we also need to be looking at this long term. You know, as a true baby boomer, when you were in grade school, when I was in grade school, I had a choice to be a stewardess, a teacher, or a nurse. That's probably what women usually had professions at. Today, that is not true. Women have all kinds, especially women particularly, but men also. Everybody has a lot of opportunities out there, so we're in competition for that career path. I think we need to take that seriously, and there's a lot already been said to that. I've been asked by 2 preschools here in our rural community to come speak to their preschool. That's 4 and 5-year-olds. I take that very serious, and I do everything I can to be able to speak to them at their level about not only what you get to do and how you help people, but what that really means to you for a lifetime career. And some people don't want to stand still long enough to hear that information. They just want a quick fix to do that. But I don't think a quick fix is what we're looking at here. So I can be very passionate about that. So that was finally surfaced to the top of my list was the image that we've been talking about. But right next to that is the COVID. Dee's correct in every way. I think COVID has changed the face of nursing, and we'll get some of that back, but will it ever go back to being the most trusted profession forever? I'm not sure that the poll will show us there like the last 10 or 15 years. But so I think COVID has changed the face of that. And I work very hard with our recruitment group to be in our middle schools, because that's where it seems to be that we plant the seed. The children now in our school system, especially in ours here in Garden City, are asked quite quickly to identify what career path or career academy or whatever you name it, what they want to do. And so very quickly they need to decide which path they're going to. They can switch, but once they switch, they undo a lot of the work they've already done in another career path that makes it kind of difficult to make that choice. So recruitment of middle school. The next piece I have listed here is qualified applicants. We've already spoke about that too. I will put some more on that. One item, I too am struggling now with qualified applicants. I've not had that struggle ever before, but it's happening. COVID had some to do with that. I'm kind of dealing with what I call COVID fallout right now. Some people are coming back. Some people were in the pathway, and then when everything broke apart with COVID, they decided that wasn't something they wanted to do. And now some of them are kind of drifting back, and we're getting some more. But qualifications, everyone's being pressed to make sure they don't have any barriers for students to get in your program, and make sure that you have it as seamless as you can. That doesn't mean I'm going to drop or intend on dropping the rigor. The product that we put out needs to be public safety, first concern. But the facilities that hire our students, they want good product, and we need to make sure they are very competent in what they do. So that means the rigor for me has to stay. Are there pieces that we could change and tweak a bit? Yes. And we've just spent the last year working on a curriculum rewrite. And to echo some of the other comments that were made, we found a way to change a little different, some things with our prereqs so that we could add 3 hours to our nursing curriculum because it needed to be there. We'd not touched that for several years. It needed to be done. And I think you'll see we will see a great influx with the way we handle that and being able to do that. But those 3 hours were greatly needed, and to help finish those students off in the quick turnaround we have with just a few semesters to make a professional nurse out of these students, especially at the community college level. Acuity at the facilities, these students now take care of. Acuity is climbing every day. Inpatient stay is going down. We know that, but the requirement of those students, a 2-year graduate out of our program is to charge us on a med-surg floor carrying a full load of patients. They just changed some structure and don't all have unit clerks to help with orders. We all know what that's like. Plus, they're also going to be in charge of the floor and be the charge nurse, have their own set of patients. So I know there in some of the documentation that I saw that the board sent out was some talk about apprenticeships. I'm saying that's not going to be the answer, but I don't know how institutions are going to be able to find the time to do that when we don't even have enough patients for our students to be able to take a full load. So there's some pieces there. I don't think one thing is a fix, but that's a real strain on the system, I think. I don't know how quality instruction for a student will happen just by working. I know there's some other factors to that can be changed and switched. One of the other things I wanted to just speak to was simulation. I know there was some discussion in some of that documentation also about increasing the simulation. I have one example I'd like to share with you. We did a lot of simulation with our PNs because the PN IV certification was available to them at that time. We did a lot of that Zoom and online because we couldn't have them with us. And I'm now seeing a product in my second year in my RN group that is really lacking in that area totally because of the way we were not right there by them, able hand to hand, show them how to hold that Abacath and put that at the correct angle to start that IV, right? Those are very practical applications. That's what I am. I'm grassroots. But we're struggling now. And part of that, some of it was new content. I will give it that. But a lot of it was the fact that we did that all online as much as we could. I don't think that benefited those students. So I like simulation. It helps us fill in the gaps that we're not able to take care of in the clinical site, we're not able to get to. I appreciate that opportunity, but upping the amount of hours and doing it mostly without live participants in that group, even though standardized patients, you might bring those in, I'm really struggling there with the real life opportunities that these students need to have whenever they are taking care of our families and Kansas, people that live in the state of Kansas. The other thing too is I would be open to any questions anybody would have. I do this every day, so I think everybody else knows exactly what I do. And I have found out through this journey that's not true. We all have very, like Juliana, for example, helping institute and run a facility. I've not done that. So I lean on those people for those opportunities to learn there. But if I can help at that grassroots area, what really it means to us, I would be open to any questions anybody would have. So thanks for the time to let me share.
Thank you very much, Patsy. We appreciate the comments from both you and Dee. I would like to, let's hear from our LPN folks. And then as Patsy pointed out, I think it's important that we have some question time. I think that we have some true experts here on the line. So as long as Patsy, Sally, Janine, Dee, you all have time to stay with us and don't need to jump off, I would like to hear from our LPN guests, if that's okay.
Hi, I'm Christina Rudisell, Johnson County Community College. And so you're going to hear a lot of repetitive comments again. But I was talking to some colleagues across the state, and one thing that we came to is we need to stop the bleed course on how to retain your nurses once they get there. Because that's what we're seeing quite a bit is, nursing. There's a mass exodus right now of nursing, and a lot of it, yes, money helps, but quite honestly, it's just being respected as a human being. It's being treated appropriately, not being verbally abused would be beneficial. So that's a lot of it. And unfortunately, as educators, we can't fix that once they get out to the facilities. We also all agree that there's not going to be a quick fix, but it's not all education either. It doesn't matter how many nurses we put out there. If they don't get retained, we're just kind of filling a black hole. So there has to be, I think it needs to be a cooperative on both sides of how that helps. Clinical sites, are an issue for a lot of reasons. One, of course, as everybody has stated, we all share our clinical sites, which is fine because especially in Kansas, we all get along really well. So we can make that work. But the issue is that when you have 5 nursing education buildings going into the same facility on different days, the nurses never get a break. And they get testy. And they're already short-staffed. They're already working hard. So the students aren't treated well. And oftentimes they leave nursing within a year to 2 years after graduating. Safety, of course, is of the utmost. And I agree. I feel terrified when the idea of removing clinical hours comes up. I don't know how to create a safe nurse if they are not able to practice and to utilize those skills under supervision before it's up to them to manage that life. And I think that sometimes people that don't do what we do forget what we do. We're the barrier that keeps you alive when somebody else makes a mistake. So I feel like, that image would be nice, something along those lines. But for LPN, the few things that we could suggest, and I was not quite as diligent as the others, I will be the first to admit, but we've been talking about it for, a few years on how we can, if we had a magic wand and could do whatever we wanted, what would we do? And one of them is for the practical nursing programs to be allowed to use preceptors when able. And again, that brings out its own set of challenges because finding somebody with the experience necessary and the desire. But also, we had mentioned as well that to go above one level up instead of having to have a bachelor's degree at the LPN level for clinical only, not in the classroom, but perhaps for clinical or perhaps for a skill. That's where they would be limited to. So that would allow LPN programs to hire ADNs for the clinical setting. The other part of it was, sorry, just lost my head. I'm looking at my notes and it just went out of my brain. But there's not enough longevity in the nursing clinical sites that we're seeing. And then the other part, like Patsy said, is the acuity. What used to be med surg is now at home, and what used to be ICU is on med surg. And it's just, so we have to make sure that they're ready to take care of these very ill patients. And we can't do that without enough staff. We can't do it without enough clinical sites. We can't do it, without being able to emulate those scenarios. And I too am a huge advocate for simulation. I fight every year the good fight for our budget to be able to maintain our simulations because it is incredibly beneficial. But again, I would agree with Patsy that, simulation is not everything. They have got to be in the facility because that's really where all the dots start getting connected. And then I'm going to allow Susan to speak on that, and I'm sure she'll fill in whatever I forgot. So, but I do appreciate you guys doing this. It's kind of a scary time right now with all of this. So thank you for being so diligent and getting all of us together. I appreciate it. And I would agree with Patsy as well. If there's anything that you need, I think we're all ready and able to answer any questions you have.
Thank you, Christina. We do very much value all of you. We appreciate you being here. Was Sally going to make some comments maybe?
Oh.
Hi, Sally.
It's Sue Anderson. Are you ready for me?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. I apologize. Hi, Sue.
Hi, I'm the Director of Nursing for Kansas City, Kansas Community College, and I'm the Director for the Associate Degree and the Practical Nursing Program. And I appreciate the opportunity to speak here today. I'm also an active member of the Certified Nurse, Collegiate Nurse Educators of Kansas City. So all of the directors in Kansas City have a group, and it includes all 3 types of programs: BSN, ADN, p.m. So I have some comments from them too, but I'd like to start out by sharing my thoughts is that we are on the edge of a perfect storm from my perspective. And here are the things that are happening. We have decreased enrollment like across the state, everybody you talk to. I have a colleague at a very well-known community college in Kansas, but I don't want to identify them. They're half full right now. They've never been half full. We are taking less prepared students because of them graduating from high school. Their sciences are not what they should be. Their math are not what they should be. Everybody just got passed and now they're coming to us. So, and also we're trying to fill our spots. So where I used to have 3 applicants for every spot, I have about 1.5 now. So I'm taking students I probably didn't have to take before because I had so many to choose from. I talked to Karen LaMartina at Johnson County and her applications were down 75%. So that is a severe problem on the horizon. Next problem we're all facing is NextGen comes out in April. Everyone knows when the new NCLEX changes, pass rates drop, right? It's always been that way. And finally, in Kansas, we elected to go to an 80% pass rate in 2021 for the first time. We were at 75%. So all of that is hitting schools at once. So with that 80%, after 1 year, I would receive a letter that, kind of puts me on warning. After 2 years, focused visit, 3 years, I could be, closed. Those were the new requirements put in place last year. No one anticipated COVID when we developed those guidelines. Those are pretty similar to a lot of states, I'm sure. But in the meantime, ASIN is our accreditor. They have responded by changing the requirement from their perspective. So I was at a meeting with our CNE group and we brought up the changes that ASIN has said, because last year, for example, our school, the national pass rate for ADN program was 78.78, and our program was 78.38. And our program has had some struggles over the past few years. We have a lot of first generation college. We have a very diverse college. We are trying to graduate these guys as nurses. So for the first time, we almost made the national average, which for us was a win. But we were, that's a penalty in Kansas, right? So what the ASIN has done is they have changed, and I actually wrote that comment to ASIN. And I said, listen, I am near the national average, and yet I didn't meet the guideline for ASIN of 80% first time. So they have changed their guidelines, and the guidelines are now, this is a little bit complicated, but I'll summarize them for you. They still have the 80% pass rate first time. If you meet that, of course, you're golden. Or if you meet 80% as an average for 3 years. So for example, KCK would have met the guideline last year because our pass rate before COVID exceeded 85%, but then COVID hit us. And of course we did not exceed. I think we're at 0.11 away. So if you had that 3-year average, that could help programs. Second way you can meet the pass rate for ASIN is, sorry, brain just froze, is meeting your national average for your program type. So right now, the national average is in the 70s for ADN programs. It's really low. I don't know what it'll end up being for 2022, but we certainly are exceeding it at this moment in time. But I can't guarantee we're going to meet 80% because another problem we're having is people that went to nursing school 5 years ago are now deciding to take the boards for whatever reason, because everybody needs nurses, right? So that is a second way. Or if you meet the national average, if you average your scores for 3 years and you meet it that way. The third way is also the way a lot of health professions do the pass rates. And it is what I would call an ultimate pass rate. So for example, I have students that for whatever reason decide to take the NCLEX as a practice test. And then they say, oh, gee, I didn't make it. Now I should study. And they turn around in 3 weeks and pass the thing. But right now, that counts against us. That's a fail. No matter if they pass a week later, well, you know, it's not 3 weeks. I'm sorry, it's 45 days. My bad. But they go on and pass it. And so we have a super high ultimate pass rate. So ASIN is now recognizing the ultimate pass rate. And in addition to that, if you don't get the ultimate pass rate for this year, did your average for 3 years achieve the ultimate pass rate? So those are ASIN guidelines. And I was talking with them with my colleagues at CNE, and they had the CCNE guidelines out at that time, which are the guidelines for the 4-year. And they said, well, Sue, they're the same now. CCNE and ASIN are the same. And I said, okay, so now our state requirements are higher than accreditation, when usually it's the other way around. So in my opinion, and the opinion of our group, so our group actually was writing a letter at that moment to the Missouri Board of Nursing, because remember, a lot of our members are from Missouri, and it was UMKC and William Jewell, and they were initiating the letter. And I just mentioned, we're having the same issue in Kansas. Could you please share that letter with our representatives of the Board of Nursing? So they were just writing that when I heard about Carol's experience at the legislature. So we kind of got that letter through, but they're firmly on board with this, whether they're baccalaureate, whether they're associate degree, all of us are seeing the same thing. All of us have decreased enrollment. The other thing I would mention to us, to me, that would be a relatively quick fix. And I'll tell you another thing, when I have a lot of students, just last week was, failing. And I have a very strict fail policy, and I have to, because I have to achieve these pass rates or we're closed. But I have students that if I could give them more time, right now, we are more generous than a lot of schools because of the type of student we have. And I've written for grants for our students to have success sessions. And that's another thing. I have all these ideas. Most LPN programs in Kansas are not accredited, but they don't qualify for the Nurse Initiative grant. So I can't get grant funding for the LPN program. I did get it for the RN program, and I used it for student success sessions to pay faculty to do success sessions. If we could have more funding to support these students where I don't have to fail them because they're killing my pass rates, we've had to make it very rigorous because we have to improve. Our program needs to stay open. That I think if there was some kind of scholarship for students in need, I'm a firm believer in a community college is such an economical way to put nurses out. I will also say my LPN applications are critical. Like, they're so low, and I've never had more requests for LPNs my entire time there. They are in huge demand in Kansas City at all of the hospitals. So in particular, anything you could do to promote the LPN, I'm with everyone else that there's no way I would decrease clinical hours. If there's any way to fund us on this simulation, it is so expensive. I don't have a problem doing a percentage of sim. We certainly found out. And that's the other thing that's contributing to the perfect storm you're going to see. My graduates that just graduated in December, their first 2 semesters, their clinical was very limited because of COVID. So our pass rates, I don't anticipate 80%. And so if you penalize us right at a time where these graduates are coming out from COVID, we can't win. We just can't. And we do want to take a chance on some of these students that maybe don't get the high things that I require for admission. Right now, I can't take a chance on them because we can't drop below 80%. So I would not be for decreasing any of their requirements or hours. I would definitely benefit if there was any help for us to pay for sim or pay for mannequins. My mannequins, I'm so proud of. They're 3 years old. The school bought all new mannequins for us because everything in our lab was broken. And that cost $500,000. And the repairman came to see our mannequins this summer. And he said, "Oh, you have old mannequins." And they're only 3 years old. And we're like, these are wonderful to us. They're so new. And they're like, yeah, it's time to think about replacing them. Well, we have 12. We can ask for one a year from the Nurse Initiative grant if we get 80%. Otherwise, no. So those are challenges that I wanted to bring forth. I'm really worried as a program. And honestly, our whole community college benefits from the nursing program being there. It would, I literally think if our program could not exist, we would not have Kansas City, Kansas Community College. So thank you for listening. I have been wanting to share that information, and I am happy to be available for questions.
Thank you so much, Susan. We appreciate you being here. Okay, I'm gonna pause there for board members to ask any questions or any thoughts. This has been really insightful for me, and I'm gonna just kind of open it up and see if there's board members that have questions.
Hi, Madam President.
Board staff have questions. Hi, Melissa. Go ahead.
Sorry. I am Melissa Orteza, board member. I have a question. How does the Kansas Promise Scholarship, is that throughout the state, through every program? Is that just ADN? Does everybody utilize that? Is it being utilized?
It is being utilized at the community colleges very, very heavily for ADN and LPN. It's being utilized for both. I cannot speak to baccalaureate. So I don't know about them.
How many slots is that?
I'm sorry.
Slots, like, is it for every nurse who applies? That's an option, or?
Well, they have, so if they apply for my understanding we have our financial aid kind of manages that. So I have limited understanding, but I'll tell you what I know. So my understanding is that once the student applies for it, it'll help pay for books, tuitions, any fees, like stethoscopes or any required materials necessary for that, as long as they commit to working within Kansas for so many years, is my understanding. I don't know how many slots it offers, like how many students can apply. I think it's based off of how much is available and how many applicants they get, is my understanding. But again, I have a very limited understanding.
Okay, thank you.
This is Patsy from Garden.
I'm sorry, go ahead.
I'm sorry. This is Patsy from Garden City. One thing about the Promise for us is that our financial aid group is constantly telling us there's more money available. Please apply, please apply. There's more money for students to get. So we're pushing students all the time. As to the cap on that, I'm not sure what that is, but whenever they send that notice, we're definitely delivering that to students. They're getting it also by email and by text and everything else too. But I don't think there's anyone that wants that. That has been denied, as far as I know, in my group.
And Melissa, this is Dee, and I'm also community college. I can address that. I don't know about a cap. I do know that several of our students have participated in that. I also want to share that we have 2 clinical partnerships. In other words, clinical facilities that are also doing that, to where they're paying for the students' education up front with their own sign on type, the student would have to sign on for that. The other thing I would just caution on that is that because we're a border, so we're bordering Oklahoma, Missouri, is that the barrier for us is that our students can sign on for the Kansas Promise Act, and then seriously, they can move over to one of those states and almost double their money. So in their, for their first wage. And so they are apt to pay off that loan, what you would want to call that, and then take a different position. So it may not be effective across all the corners of the state of Kansas. So, but certainly we promote it and have some students who participate in it.
I was just going to offer, this is Janine from Kansas Wesleyan, that while our program doesn't qualify for the Kansas Promise Scholarship, they have amazing opportunities through our local hospital. And I can't remember the name of the program. There's a program where the student has to identify an employer that will work with this, but our hospital comes and talks to our students about this scholarship. It's $10,000 for a 2-year tie of service, which has been incredible in helping students pay off their student loans from, private education. We also scholarship our students, institutionally with very, very large scholarships to make the cost of their tuition very similar to what they would pay to go to a state institution when they graduate. So we're doing everything we can to make it a little bit more affordable for students. And that scholarship through the hospital has been a very big influence on our students. They agree to this. They interview at the hospital as juniors in the program, and they commit, but they don't stay. They literally will work out their 2 years and they are out of there. They are burnout, done. And that's the problem. And we've, in the kindest way possible, expressed to the hospital, we can encourage our graduates to come to you. We can encourage them to go to work in this incredible experience and be with you for 2 years, but you have to retain them. You have to do what it takes to keep them there. We don't control that. And so we've actually, tongue in cheek, said maybe some sort of dating service to get them hooked up with somebody and staying here. I don't know. We thought about that, a match.com, but it just doesn't work beyond 2 years. Yeah, seriously.
This is Sally. Yeah, and I totally agree with Janine. We have a number of institutions that do provide scholarships, loan repayment, different forms to try to sign on bonuses for new students to come in. But again, if the environment, some of the rest of you spoke to this too, not just pay, but the respect, having a voice in decision making, being at the table, having reasonable work-life balance, all those kinds of things, they're not going to stay. And sadly, some of them leave nursing altogether.
I don't know if this is relevant, but another thing that's just a little bit unnerving is our graduates, usually when they graduate, they'd have no problem getting a job. They're always, med-surg. What I'm seeing now is all of our graduates are going right to the ICU, which is not something I'm speaking about ADN right now, but right to the ICU, right to the PICU, these high levels of care that, I don't know, it makes me a little nervous that we always try to encourage them, please, start in a med-surg unit, get a couple of years experience, but the ICUs are everyone's so short, they'll give the students anything they want, even if it's not best for the student, while they get their experience. But it's a good time to graduate and be a nurse. The world's your oyster, but I'm not sure we're getting the most experience nurses in these high level places.
This is Christina with Johnson County, and I would agree with everything that's been said. We're seeing the same thing. And I've talked to several of our clinical partners that, scholarship our students within our program and with the agreement. And they're like, well, what can we do to keep them afterwards? I'm like, well, I can't fix that problem for you. And just to give you kind of an example of some of the abuse that the nurses are seeing is there was a hospital in Kansas. I won't name any names, but they notified all of their nurses that any incoming nurse that's hired was going to start off $5 an hour more than they were. And then they were shocked when people started giving them their resignation. So you're going to hire somebody that is a brand new graduate, and they're going to make $5 more an hour than, let's say, what I would do, that I've been here for 5 years. And then they were surprised that everybody wanted to leave and that the nurses were up in arms. That's the kind of stuff that's happening. It's, you have to come in on your day off or else. Well, if you give these nurses an or else, we can throw a rock and get a job. We're not going to stay. That's kind of what's happening. And, it breaks my heart. I love nursing. I love this profession, but, I can't say I blame them. We've left clinical sites because my students were being abused. That's the kind of stuff that's happening. And that's not something, again, that we in education can fix, other than telling our students that that's unacceptable behavior and it's okay to say no. That's the only thing we can do, is try to shift that culture within our schools, and hopefully graduate people that treat others a little kinder. But just kind of breaks my heart. It's not good.
I was at an advisory board this spring, and there were 2 hospitals there from Kansas City, and one is just a beautiful hospital in Johnson County, and they've had numerous incidents of nurses getting their teeth knocked out by the patients. And another hospital was there that they cannot even have a female nurse go in the room, and the patient has a armed guard and a large male 24-hour-a-day sitter, and the patients have been in the hospital greater than a year. So these are the things that our new graduates are. I don't know if that's something a legislation could do anything about. I know it'd be hard for education, but is there some kind of penalty for violence against nurses? Because I'll be honest, a new nurse, they don't have the emotional intelligence to handle those situations well. I don't know that anybody does, honestly. It's very dangerous.
So Susan, I will speak, and this is not from a state board of nursing perspective, but there were several healthcare providers, to include physicians, nurses, administrators, that went and advocated for a bill that would make it a felony to assault a healthcare provider. It did not pass last year. Reason being is the bill was written so that it had to be a hospital employee, and that we know there's a lot of contractual employment within a facility. So whether that's a travel nurse or whether it's a group of physicians that may report to a private practice, but then they are contracted through that practice to provide services within an organization, they would not have been covered under the bill. So the bill was sent back and asked to be reworked. It had a lot of support, but it did not pass. And I don't know the extensive history on it, but I know that bill has been brought forward numerous times. It seems like it just keeps getting red tape. The first time it was denied was because there were so many people that ended up tacking on to it to include dog catchers throughout the state. And I'm being for real. I'm not making that up. There were so many professions that tried to tack on to that. So, I don't know where that bill stands this year, but the more people I think that are aware of that, it would be a good thing. So I appreciate the comments about the violence that our healthcare workers face. And I think that is real. And I think there may be some opportunities from legislation. Again, that's not from a state board of nursing perspective. That's a personal side note. So. But I appreciate everyone's comments. Are there staff? I want to ask the KSBN staff, is there any comments? Janelle, I've seen a couple things in the chat feature from you. Anything you want to ask or share?
I would just say, I put in there the question about the Promise Scholarship, and I just wanted to give that information. It is for certificate programs and 2-year programs. So I think that got answered. But one of the questions, there's something that came up on a network education call I did with some of my colleagues across the US through NCSBN. They were talking about the experience that new grads are experiencing when they come out is that they've been so focused in their education on this one-to-one and doing one patient that they're not prepared for the multiple patient experience that they're getting. And you know, again, some of that has to do with how long they get to stay in orientation. But that, I think one of the things that I heard expressed there was, and I'd be interested in what you all have talked about or learned too, and the process of the educational process of how they're building from, you know, that single patient experience to the multiple so that they're more work ready. And again, I know you're already struggling with how to get everything in the amount of time, and I can't see decreasing hours anywhere is going to help that. But just, I was hearing that from a national level and wondered if that was something that had come up in any of the discussions that you all have had at your respective groups.
I think one of the things that we see a number of institutions doing, and we do, is a capstone or an experience in the last semester where they are paired with a nurse on their shifts doing multiple patients and getting a closer to work experience. One of the other things that has been helpful, I think, are those institutions that are able to have residency programs for new grads. And, you know, we work with our one academic partner on the residency program. So graduates transition from school into the residency program. And we collaborate on that. But, you know, again, that's one institution. But, you know, again, other thoughts that have come up in other groups is, could we develop at least partially online or hybrid type of residency program where some of the core components can be delivered across the state cost-effective way for institutions, and then have by the institution, or if we've got a program set up for that, helping the institution to then customize anything that are, you know, things that are needed for their own local institution. But if we could have a more standardized residency program that was developed, that was hybrid, and that could be affordable, particularly for some of the smaller hospitals, that might be something to think about in transitioning, particularly, you know, we talk about clinical, but transitioning to that from student to RN.
I think one of the questions, this is Patsy from Garden City. One of the questions as the director of the nursing education for that community college, ADN and LPN, is what we're talking about is assignment and delegation of care. And yes, we work really hard with that to answer some of Janelle's question that she had across the country. We do something where when we don't have a lot of patients, we do something where we do some team nursing. So the students are able to experience what it's like to take care of that, because you can't be everywhere every minute. If we can give them more patients than one assigned just to them, we do that, sometimes in different capacities, but always trying some of that struggle, and they're able to work with that with somebody right by their side to help them work through the solutions to some of those very quick things that come to you while you're working in real life. Yeah.
This is Janine Houchin again from Kansas Wesleyan. I wanted to piggyback on Sally's comment. We do have a capstone experience for our students, and that's where they get their multiple patient and that experience, and that is in their final 8 weeks prior to graduation. But something else we added this year that I'm really anxious to talk with our seniors about how they feel about it, but up to this point, it's been very positive. At the beginning of the fall for the seniors, they matched with a leader mentor at the hospital at our primary clinical site. And that leader mentor is someone that, you know, they kind of dictated the amount of contact the student did that they had with that leader mentor. But it was just an opportunity for them to talk with someone in practice, to just help them with all sorts of issues. The leader mentors were selected very carefully as nurses who have a leadership role and who are very positive about their practice. Establishing that relationship and that trust and that ease of, you know, just comfort with somebody has been really beneficial. The students so far have commented on how helpful that is. They just gain a different perspective, and it can be as simple as coffee with them once a month, you know, or every other week. But that leader mentor will be someone they will be with in their leadership practicum in the first 8 weeks of the spring semester. And that unit will be where they have their capstone experience in the second 8 weeks. So we're hoping that meets multiple goals. One is comfort and ease, and just feeling more welcome and sort of establishing that culture in that institution, promoting their desire to be there, but also somebody they can talk with, you know, while they're finishing up their educational process and can just have that positive relationship with.
We assigned multiple patients in the last semester in the leadership clinical, and they're getting ready to graduate. We also simulate interdisciplinary simulation where we have an ICU and an ER going on at the same time, and the students have to manage multiple patients, and a triage simulation as well. I would say I would not really be supportive of requiring all programs to do capstones or preceptor type things. I think it would be a big barrier for our program. And I already know that in Kansas City, there's a shortage of preceptors. And the other problem the bachelor program schools are reporting is not only can they not get the preceptors don't meet the state qualifications. I know for Missouri, and I'm sorry, I don't know the qualifications by heart for Kansas since we don't use preceptors, but I would not be excited to hear like, oh yeah, now you guys are going to have a capstone, because I don't think I could even provide that. But there is a sincere shortage of qualified preceptors in the Kansas City area.
And Janelle, I will follow up with answering your question in that is something interesting that our faculty have just been talking about. And so we're real into let's doing a pilot project before, because we're all trying to get to that same outcome, primarily using and helping students to do that multi-load. And I think it was Dr. Sally who said that transition from the student to the RN. We totally understand that. But a couple of barriers that our faculty have developed, or at least identified at this point, is that because of the patient acuity, that we need more than one nurse faculty in the clinical site at the same time in order. So instead of having one faculty to 6 students, we're now going to need 2 faculty to those 6 or 8 or whatever. And so then that's more expense for the college. So that was a barrier when it comes to the budget. The second, then we evaluated is this an opportunity to hire another simulation nurse, who then at least we could provide some simulation multi-patient load, which are again a possibility. However, now that's going to increase the budget to include another clinical instructor. So we're real into, we'd like to make an informed decision so that we're not just doing reaction. But with doing that, it's going to take a lot of prep to do that. But we are definitely trying to address that. And I think Susan just said, it's not going to be something that each and all programs across the state are going to be able to do the same. In other words, there's not probably a single answer for all the diversity in different programs that we have across the state.
And this is Sally. In talking with some of my colleagues, we kind of came up with an off-the-wall crazy idea. And we kind of, what it came down to was, well, could we do a mobile simulation unit? Or mobile simulation units that, you know, were funded, were staffed, and could go to schools where, or institutions that simulation is just too expensive to do and to staff. And, you know, even using that with this hybrid, residency program. But that was another, yeah, well, let's dream.
Hey, Juliana.
Yeah, Carol, go ahead.
This is Carol Moreland, and I just kind of wanted to maybe kind of update everybody on here the next step as I know it right now. This actually happened after the board meeting, so the board doesn't even know this part. I was invited to the meeting this Wednesday. However, I don't know who the other ones are. I've kind of heard some things through the grapevine, but I don't know if they're totally true. Who's going to be the other ones there? What we were told is we were given 5 topics and we had to rate them on, like, 1 being the one we wanted to talk about the most, clear down to 5 being the one we wanted to talk about the least. And then assignments would be made and we would be told which ones we were assigned to talk to. I presume, so I'm just telling you that because I'm going to have to kind of pick and choose some of the comments based on what I get assigned. And I don't know how much time there's going to be given to each person to speak. I don't know if each person is going to be granted the same amount of time. I've heard some things about that too, so I'm not sure. But just to kind of let you know that the topics were, number 1, licensee availability and transferability. Number 2, retired workforce. And I think that's because there's some belief over there that the retirees want to come back and work. But I have kind of talked to some retirees and the interest does not seem to be there. So I'm not sure about that one. Another one is incentive programs. Another one is tracking and evaluation of incentive programs. And then the 5th one is wage disparities. So how I chose it, thinking probably maybe this would be the most helpful coming from the Board of Nursing, is number 1, the licensee availability and transferability. I put that in there for one reason, that there's not very good understanding over there of multi-state licensure being part of the compact, what that means and stuff like that. Number 2, I chose incentive programs because I'm hearing a lot of what you said today, and I had heard that before. Number 3 was wage disparities. I'm hearing that today. I also heard some of this from LMHTs and stuff like that. Number 4 is the tracking and evaluation of the incentive programs. My fear of whatever is instituted over there, a solution sometimes is that the Board of Nursing will take care of this and the Board of Nursing will track this and do all of this. So I would just hopefully like to have a voice in that, because I'm not sure it's always the Board of Nursing, the ones who should be tracking and evaluating some of these. And then the last one I chose is retired workforce. for the very reason I said. We got a lot of calls when COVID was first going on about, I'm retired, I would really like to come back and help. Okay. But when you really started talking to them about it, they hadn't worked for quite a number of years. They thought maybe just coming back and maybe directing traffic, or something along that line. So it wouldn't be what I would actually call nursing per se. And I think probably the employers might have a few things to say if they bring someone back that hasn't had any experience for a number of times. They mean very well. However, they're going to have to look at patient safety and that. But I will tell you there's kind of a topic that I'm hearing a lot over there. And I would just kind of like to get your take on it. And that is this whole nursing apprenticeship. I'm hearing it called nursing apprenticeship. I'm hearing it called nursing internship. There's a lot of models out there, but it seems to be that maybe they're taking students in their last semester and they're letting them be hired by the institution and actually work and be paid by the institution while they're finishing up their clinical time. So they get clinical credit for that time that they're actually working. And a lot of what I'm understanding is it would be done under a nurse at the clinical facility, not really a clinical faculty from the nursing education program. So I think this may be spoken to over there a little bit. So I just wondered if each of you could kind of give me your thoughts on that, if you know much more about it, anything along that line, because I think this may come up over there. I'm not saying that's good or bad. I'm just saying I think it may come up.
I think this is happening already a little bit in Kansas City because I'm hearing 2 hospitals I know of are paying the students that are in their capstone. Now, remember that I don't have capstone, so I'm not the most informed, but I know Liberty Hospital in North Kansas City are paying the students. The concern I have as a director is clearly in my handbook, I state, you may not do any of your functions as a nursing student without our faculty there. So I guess there'd have to be a lot of guidance for us as to who is responsible and is this student just working as a nurse's aide? Because how does that benefit anything other than staffing the hospital? If this student is truly allowed to manage IVs and I'm speaking of, well, I guess both our RN and PN students, I don't think it would work so much for PN students because I don't know, it's just structured a little different for our program. We need a lot of guidance, I would say, because right now I would feel very nervous. My students aren't allowed to do anything unless there's a faculty there. So what are the rules related to it? And they're doing it now. It's, from what I'm hearing, it's, well, this is already our employee. She's a nurse's aide. We're going to make sure we give her preceptorship in the ICU. So what's happening to a lot of other students who do not have a job somewhere yet is they're not getting the capstone or the capstone they want. So it's very competitive right now. But it is happening in North Kansas City Hospital and also Liberty Hospital. So they might be able to provide some feedback as to how that's going.
Yeah. I saw that in the packet, and I do have some queries out to some of my colleagues, and especially a couple of them who are in Missouri, as to what this is about. At one point, Northeastern University had an apprenticeship program. Concerns that I have, I think echo Sue's. We do for clinical credit, for clinical practice as a student, require that we have faculty available. And when we have affiliate faculty, in institutions where we have students, we're paying them or we're paying the institution to release that faculty's time to work for us with the students. So how we turn that around, that they're paying students, I don't know. And we have a number of our students that do work in various institutions as CNAs. But I think in order for it, and I think, you know, we would have to go back and look at CCNE as to, you know, whether that could even be considered as clinical hours if they're being supervised and evaluated by their employee and not their educational institution.
Thank you for saying that, Sally, because that's exactly where I was going to go. We border again, so Missouri does this in our corner. So I am somewhat familiar with this by some of those programs that I get to sit on different and various advisory committees with. What they tell me is that they call it a preceptor. The school, in other words, the School of Nursing does not pay for that. However, for the state of Kansas, as I think Sue said, it's in our handbook because in the Nurse Practice Act, it says we have to separate those roles. So which has always been what I have brought forward in that if it's not a matter of if, it's a matter of when something occurs with a student and it creates a liability. And so if they're in the role of a student, of course, their student liability insurance is going to identify and pick that up. When they're in the institution and being paid by, for example, the hospital, then my assumption is that falls into the hospital liability, not that. There's where I think there are some blurredness that I would definitely, as a program director, want some very clear guidelines in that direction. And the other thing is exactly what was mentioned is that ACEN, we would have to, right now, we're required that you must be a qualified nurse faculty meeting the academic requirements, meeting the experience requirements in order to evaluate a student, which is one of the things that we brought up earlier, why it's so expensive for our programs, because you can't just get, quote, a nurse from the hospital to become a clinical instructor or didactic instructor. So those would be things that I think, not that it's good or bad, I think if it may be an opportunity, certainly for all of us, but I do think we need to evaluate those things in particular.
This is Patsy, Garden City again. One of the things that we do is our program outcomes lean pretty heavy on making sure each one of those students accomplish those. That's an ACEN requirement, of course, and along with the board. And that clinical site for us as educators and experienced clinicians tie those pieces together from the classroom and that clinical site pretty hard. That's where all the dots come together. And I too was at the bedside when I'd have students with me. I was not as good at that as I am today, hopefully, because I do know the objectives. I do know what the outcomes need to be, and helping inform those people and making sure that they have the same interests that school does so they can check the balances and check all the boxes too. That's very important. It would be a lot of communication, not that it couldn't be done, certainly could be, but we would have to have certainly would have to attend some of our meetings to understand what those outcomes and how precious those are to us.
This is Christina with Johnson County, and I would echo what Patsy said. I mean, I think that it's doable. A lot of states are doing it because of the nursing shortage, but it would require a lot of training on all sides and figuring out, again, like Dee said, about when something happens with that student who accepts liability. And also we would have to speak to our national accreditors to let them know that our state is doing that. Because I mean, Missouri is actively doing it. I had the privilege of sitting on a workforce committee where for Missouri side, because again, we're bordering, but and they are doing it all the way from CNA all the way up. So they're very active in that. So they would be a good one to look at if we did decide to go on that route. But also, speaking of apprenticeship, the Department of Ed offered that grant, that enormous grant. But, you know, in order to funnel money into schools, into nursing education, but the requirements was like you had to have 1,000 hours of clinical and all these things. And, you know, it's like, I don't know how to do 1,000 hours of clinical in 9 months and didactic when the student has a life outside of that. And so, you know, although we would all love to tell them you can't have a life outside of this until you graduate, that's just not realistic today. But you know, I've given a lot of thought, and not that I'm the end all be all. I know very little when it comes right down to the end of the day, but you know, when it comes down to how many clinical hours there is an expense, not just for the school, but there's an expense for the student as well. You know, because those are hours that they can't work. They can't be with their family, you know, things of that nature. And if that's where we're headed, then we need to find a way to get those students paid, because there's no way they're going to be able to do both. So, you know, I mean, that's just, I know I entered nursing as a single parent, you know, and it was incredibly difficult. You know, obviously I managed it, but it was not without the sacrifices. And to be perfectly blunt, there's a lot of people that just aren't willing to make those sacrifices anymore. So, you know, that's something to look at as well, is just the type of workforce we're in today, you know, so just food for thought.
This is Janine from Kansas Wesleyan. I want to ditto what everyone has said so far and just add one other thought of, in that final semester, there is so much that our students are having to do, and the culmination of their education, that is the time when we are really hoping the light bulbs are going off and the connections are being made. And my concern is that this would shift focus into more of an orientation phase for that capstone experience, and that it would get abused. And I hate to be paranoid, but I'm just afraid if this is what they're really trying to push to do, there will be abuses of it, and they'll be asked to do more, work more, do more hours. And that is vital for us in NCLEX preparation. They're doing their capstone and they're doing their NCLEX preparation in that last 8 weeks. And I am just very concerned that throwing this at them also is going to just tip the balance and change the focus. And then, of course, you know, the snowball effect of all of it. So more food for thought.
You know, a question that kind of popped up in my mind as I looked at this: are we going back to a diploma model?
Well, I mean, there were advantages to the diploma model. There's a lot of disadvantages to the diploma model, but there were some advantages to the diploma model. I remember, so full disclosure, Janine was one of my faculty when I was going through nursing school, you know, but so I remember, you know, one of my faculty going through nursing school said, if you come across a diploma nurse while you're at clinical, grab their leg and don't let go. You know, because they know how to nurse. That's all they did through their education. So there is an advantage. I would say the disadvantage is the patients we see today are not the patients we had then. You know, I mean, the patients are so much sicker and they have so many comorbidities, and it's increasingly difficult to care for a patient. I mean, that's why we have the healthcare team, because it takes a team to care for this one person. But I would go back personally to, I think there's some advantages, and I think changes could be made, but I really think it needs to go back to, we need to be at the table with the facilities and education, and the Board of Nursing, all of us together to fix this, because I don't think it can be one group.
Well, I really appreciate all the comments from our guests today, and I've taken, I don't know, I've lost count on the number of pages of notes. So you've brought a tremendous amount of information. I've got some suggestions. I kind of have two categories within my notes. So I have some ideas of maybe some examples of things that we might consider changing within the Nurse Practice Act. And then on top of that, I have a lot of documentation of language that I think supports what we all believe, and that reducing education is probably not the direction that we want to recommend. So Carol, knowing that you are preparing for this week's meeting and to represent the Board of Nursing, Do you have any last comments? And then after we hear from you, I would like for us to consider as a task force, what are our next steps?
Okay, this is Carol Moreland. First of all, I just want to say a huge, huge thank you to all of you who took time to do this today. Again, like I said at the beginning, I feel like you're the experts on nursing education. And so I definitely want you to be involved with whatever is decided to do. I will certainly do my best to keep control, but sometimes that's a little tough to do over there. I think, once I find out what my assignments are for Wednesday, that will help me to pick out from everything that you've told us today and try to pick out the highlights, because again, I sincerely doubt we're going to get much time here to talk, kind of knowing how this goes. I have a meeting with 2 other groups and probably the third one before Wednesday, just to kind of share with them suggestions that came up today. Now, they may have been listening. I don't know. But I think there's some commonalities from what I'm hearing from some of these other organizations and stuff like that hopefully we can do a lot of collaboration here and the message will be much stronger going over there. That's my hope, and I will certainly try to make that happen before Wednesday. Other than that, just a huge thank you to all of you for your time.
We couldn't agree more, Carol. I think that's probably on behalf of the entire board, and each one of you have taken so much time, obviously, in preparation for this meeting, and then secondly, to attend the meeting. So it's very much appreciated. As far as next steps for this task force, I think, Carol, you getting your assignment and maybe understanding some more detail at this week's meeting will be key. I do think it's going to be important that we have another task force meeting to maybe put together some of the ideas coming forth here today. And then with respect to your assignment, how we might finalize some communication and just exactly who that communication would go to over at the legislature. So does that sound reasonable, Carol and other board members?
This is Carol, and I think that sounds reasonable. I will tell you without a doubt, I think something will happen over there next session. What it is, I don't know yet, but I certainly hope that the Board of Nursing and the nursing program have a lot of input to it. But as you well know, things happen over there, and sometimes you have no choice to have the input, but I have no doubts that something will happen over there this next session, some changes. But I think it's very important, like Juliana said, that we've identified some changes that can be made to the Nurse Practice Act. Okay, and so can come to the board or come to the table with that right away, is that these are changes that we see that can be made to the Nurse Practice Act. And I think, I'm hoping I get a little chance to talk to this nursing apprenticeship idea. Again, I'm not saying it's totally bad. I think there's pros and cons, and I think they need to understand that. And I think there needs to be time to really think through this, because the outcomes could be extremely important, and they might not be what they think they're going to be. And that you're not going to know until after the fact, and then you have to turn around and redo something. So I would just, hopefully they'll give us a little bit of time to think through some of this. No.
Well, and Carol, the only other thing I would add to that is, I'm not going to, I think this entire group has responded incredibly quickly. We've had several board members that were very very, very busy, tight schedules, but we're anxious to participate in today's meeting, to see the preparation from Janine, Sally, Patsy, Dee, Christina. Susan, I don't want to leave anyone out. I mean, you all came to the table very well prepared and jumped on this request very quickly. We are committed to responding expeditiously and very timely. We would just like to be heard and have this be at the direction of nurses versus maybe someone who does not truly understand our profession in the way that we do. So that would be that would be my ask personally. So. Okay, so knowing that we won't necessarily set another date for a second task force meeting, if you all just will please watch your emails and let us know if something comes up that you think we ought to be aware of. And we will just kind of anxiously await for any updates from Carol following your meeting across the street this week. And we'll keep on top of things that way. My guess is there may be some email communications that would come out, and I see Carol shaking her head. We can probably try to give some updates via email about what happens this week, and then our next steps as a task force to maybe reconvene quickly and try to come up with whatever responses are needed from this week's meeting. Does that sound okay? All right. Again, thank you all very much. For board members who took time, a week following board meeting. I know we've taken a lot of your time over the last 2 weeks, and then staff for quickly putting this together last week. Board meeting, there was some big changes within the office as well, as far as our computers and IT systems, and you all worked through all of that, and then now jumping on this call, and then especially for our guests who kind of dropped everything and came well prepared. So thank you all very much. I hope everyone has some time over the next couple of weeks to spend with your families and enjoy the holidays and take care of yourselves, and we will talk to you all very soon. Thank you.